Welcome to another episode of the Doctor's Podcast with Rabea Akram. I'm your host, Rabea Akram. I'm a medical doctor, entrepreneur, a brain health expert. And in this podcast, I interview other doctors, healthcare experts, worldwide leading experts, and find out their formula for success and health enhancement and peak performance. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Serena Goldstein. Serena is a naturopathic medical doctor. She is an expert in weight loss and hormones and endocrinology. Those are her specialties. And she's very much into holistic medicine and taking a, natural approach to healing the body as a whole. And today we want to touch all those topics: weight loss, holistic medicine, and also spirituality. So, Serena, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Serena, I want to ask you, start by asking you, what are your, biggest passions? What made you want to become a naturopathic medical doctor? Could you just give me a little bit, version of your journey?
Of course. So, growing up, I was a competitive gymnast, and middle of high school, I injured my elbow in gymnastics. So I was always, your really happy kid, and just doing everything I loved, always out of passion. And so when I injured my elbow, it was no more gymnastics and no more trombone. And clearly you could see part of my assistant, quote unquote. After that, I realized, oh my God, maybe life isn't as happy as I thought. But I didn't believe that way deep down. So I began going to the library and reading young Erickson and Freud to figure out, wait, why am I feeling this way? And the rest of that sophomore year of high school, I mean, the only constant was change, I'll put it that way. And eventually I started asking my parents if I could see a therapist. And they're like, no, you're fine. And I was like, something's not right.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward, I wound up finding a therapist at the beginning of my junior year who changed my life. And she was just so real, understanding, but it was like I could say anything and think about anything. And there was this level of acceptance. And it was from there that I was like, I'm going to get my PhD in psychology and be just like her. So I started college as a psychology major and Japanese minor because I finished with 3 honors when I was in high school. When Japanese just didn't work out, a close friend said, why don't you go pre-med? You could do more for people. And that was something that I always knew about myself, was I was always after more. But it wasn't so much from that lack, I guess. There was just this deep drive that I always had. So I thought, ooh, more treatments. Awesome, beyond just talking. And that route led me to a month later walking into a naturopathic school, because I also knew that drugs were not the only answer. So I was like, there's got to be something else. I walk into this naturopathic school and I see healing through health, vitality, doctor is teacher. And I was like, wait a second. So there's a medicine. I learned all conventional, all natural. And then my passion for psychology, because my first visits are about an hour with the person. Follow-ups are, there's that time, there's that relationship. So onward.
Love that. I love that story, that transition, those, different steps where you came to that realization that, you want to do more, not out of lack, but out of, wanting to give back more. And that sort of led you to naturopathic medicine, which you are, doing an incredible job now.
Thank
And
you.
I want to learn more about this, your current work. You told me, we recently had a talk, and you were telling me about your passion about helping people lose weight and the connection to, hormones, endocrinology, and how that and weight loss issues are connected. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Of course. So much of it was my own journey.
Yes.
And like when I was a teenager, I had the might all and proactive. Um, Depending on whenever my period decided to, some days, some months were worse than others where I'd almost pass out or just like fetal position, stopping gymnastics practice and everything. And then when I was in college, I gained the freshman 15. But I also always defined myself by my body. Like,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those, sure, people tell you you're smart. I knew I was smart to a certain extent, but I never fully believed it. Like believed it, owned it, all of that. So I actually had more confidence in my six pack and my perfect athletic figure
Yeah.
than I did in who I was.
Yeah.
So when I gained the freshman 15, all of a sudden it felt like I had nothing. And I joked that I partied harder in medical school than I did in college because the way I had so much energy out in reaching for all those diets that I was really just offering to be the designated driver because, oh my God, alcohol's extra calories. So there was a lot of deprivation, a lot of head games, and being a psychology major, just, throw in the fact that I would know even more of how to manipulate myself. And then a few years later, when I was in medical school, there will add in the stress. And then, of course, still those underlying self-worth issues. And I gained about 30 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, I'm about 5 feet. So that's a significant, I have never.
Yeah.
And that was just, oh my God, I got to get my life in order. And it was really over the course of a year and a half. But this is where progress was, you're healing, then sometimes it feels like a step back, but then I'd reach that next plateau.
Yeah.
And from there was the power of long-term healing.
Mm.
But that's something I always knew, which was sustainable. So now fast forward into practice, and even though there was a period of time that I had all my accolades, I really wanted to just connect with people because that's who I am. And I've always been that social butterfly. So I began specializing in weight and hormones, with my whole website being, here's my roller coaster of a journey.
Yeah.
And from there, which I'm sure we'll get into as well, because the piece around spirituality was also realizing that while that is, still the predominant of my clientele, well, when patients are also now getting diagnosed with cancer, autoimmune, or fitness professionals are like, we need this just tune up. Just what are these? We're so much more than just weight and hormones. Like we
Yeah.
all have a story. And that's where I now really am in this next chapter of expanding,
Yeah.
beyond the physical.
Right, right. I love that, approach that you take, the psychological perspective, and then, the holistic, the body mind connection. And then you also look at that spirituality. And I'm going to get to that. My next questions, I love those perspectives you offer. I would love to, talk about those. However, on the topic of weight loss and hormone, while we're at it, maybe you want to tell us, for the viewers who are not medical professionals, who want to know more about the connection between all these hormones. You talked about your cycles and the different phases that you've gone through. Knowing that, and also being an expert in this field, can you tell us a little more about how hormones kind of affect our weight problems, and what are the connections here?
Of course. So there's actually multiple connections we can go into. So right on my website, is where I have the phrase, I believe the body is a metaphor for our life. So part of the way my practice began shifting, because while yes, I have my own journey, all of a sudden my patients were starting to come to me after all the cleanses, after trying all the supplements, after doing all the right stuff.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking. I mean, as I granted, my head's always going, but I was like, wait a second. I mean, sure, we know there's no quick fix, but for it to actually marinate in. And then the more we began talking was when I realized that the fat cell has over 10 different receptors. Wait a second. Even the fat cell is telling us there's no magic pill. So, what does that mean? So, when it comes to weight can change. Our lives can change. So, are we flexible? Soon I began seeing incongruencies in people's lives and in their health. That all of a sudden health became this laser focused, where actually the stress that they were putting on themselves was really overriding so much of the so-called good stuff they were already doing. And that comes into part of the stagnancy. So as we know too, our physiology is always moving. So some of those receptors are vitamin D. So, even something is making sure those vitamin D levels are optimal. Things like estrogen, testosterone, which are our sex hormones, insulin, which helps manage our blood sugar and our cravings. Those are all growth hormones. And well, clearly, I'm sure we're talking about this, so our fat is not growing. Because our fat cell is still a fat cell, so same thing, you could expand and contract. So really getting those main hormones in balance, but also they're going to be affecting the others. So, you could say, okay, so elevated estrogen, which is actually super common in not just women, but also men, that can hinder the thyroid. Our thyroid is our metabolism. If our metabolism starts to slow, well, so does our digestion. We actually have a portion of gut bacteria that metabolizes estrogen, to help, detox it out of our body. So if our metabolism is slow, that means other digestive pieces like the liver and the gut are going to be slower as well, allowing extra estrogen to also recirculate. So it's also coming to the piece of, yes, you need to take responsibility, but it's not solely your fault. And I think that's another important discrepancy as well, because we kind of part of that psychology too is because weight is protection, like, oh, just get it off me. I need it gone. I don't feel myself.
Mhm.
Well, what does then feeling yourself really mean? Because this
Yeah.
is literally just your physical body.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Love that, the connections and that perspective, seeing the person as a whole. So Serena, now that we have talked about the connections between all the different hormones, and you talked about how even gut bacteria is related to all those hormones, and how it kind of is a two-way process, the weight and the human being as a whole. What is your opinion on how to bring all these pieces together, and how can we ensure that the way our body is reacting to all these different stress factors, how we're putting on weight or losing, how do we make that holistic connection? And what's your like you say, you told me also previously that there is no magic pill, but if there isn't one, what is the best way to go to find the ideal weight and to live that ideal happy life?
Of course. So yeah, I love that whole, I'm like, all right, so we can, branch a little here and there. So I think to your last question would be a great starting point, because one of the hardest things to do, and I've seen this, even with patients, is when I say, imagine, and I say this part loosely, imagine the weight you want to be or how you want to look,
Yeah.
then to how you want to feel. Because sometimes, depending on where they are in their journey, it's like needing, all right, let's get what is what do you look like slash feel like? And how can you start to feel like that right now? And oh my God, the kickback that I'll get, but I'm not like that, so how am I going to do that? The thing is, our body takes time to change. And even though, yes, there are risk factors for, weight gain itself or if our weight plateaus, but the other piece too, which I've seen, once again, both in myself and in patients and when I've done talks and everything, is what if your weight is also trying to teach you something? And that it's part of a bigger lesson, because if you're attaching your self-worth and your life purpose to literally your weight itself, then are you really living? And are you really enjoying your life? Which also helps relieve the stress that we're putting on ourselves, in that moment. So what we can change on the day-to-day, so then coming into more of your questions, is how we feel mentally and emotionally. That we can change day-to-day. Our physical body, we have a timeline for it, but our body doesn't. It really doesn't care. It's just going to respond to the energy and the intentions and the, good vibes per se, and the letting go that we're putting out into the universe. Like, are we truly enjoying ourselves and this journey? So from the mindset piece, if you are bumping up against, well, what if I can't feel this way? Then I'm going to challenge you and say, why? Get that inner 3-year-old out, even the one that paints all over the walls. And where did that voice come from? Who told you that? How did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Because the more we realize that actually so much of what we're told is more perception, or someone else's, or it's like, wait a second, how did I come to believe that? Because, we all have our inner stuff, including generational karma and trauma. So once again, may not just be totally you.
Yeah.
Then we really get to explore and then have this mourning period of being able to sit with that. And then I think to your last, or to part of your last question, is then from that higher perspective is, this is change. If you're now doing something differently, your body's going to do something differently. And if you're feeling lighter, your body will eventually respond. And that's part of this flow, and as I've seen, even with working with entrepreneurs, their business has grown. They have a greater sense of purpose. And all of a sudden, even their whole shift as to, wait, how can I nourish my life instead of hating a body?
Yeah. And that's an excellent perspective, that our weight is not just connected to, it's not just a separate thing that you measure, and that's just the outcome of the food you put in your body and the exercise you do, which is kind of like a binary way of looking at things. A lot of people just, a lot of the time we tend to, see it that way, but there are so many other factors, like how we feel about ourselves and the thoughts that we think. And even, you just mentioned going back into your childhood and just take a good look at what are the things that you're still holding on to that you did not process from, earlier life and earlier childhood. And that totally makes sense, from a psychological perspective. A lot of the times how we show up in our lives, the kind of personalities we develop sometimes are at very deep subconscious levels, or the results of things we have gone through that have shaped our personalities and everything. And there are a lot of the times many things that, if the weight is out of balance and I'm not happy about my weight and my life right now, it may make sense to go back and process some things that need to be processed and take a good look at how I feel internally about myself, right? And that's so powerful. I just loved what how you link all those seemingly completely separate things together, and that link is there. I mean, it's such a strong link, and it's just one that should not be ignored. I just really absolutely love that. Moving on to how we talked about diseases and how people recover, and going through different phases in life. You talked about change, like change is a natural part of life. And I want to know your perspective on how to deal with changes, and how, also disease related, people when they fall ill, and how you make that bigger connection in that.
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this by saying, I mean, as humans, we are emotional. And, it's not just, like, okay, plaster a smile on your face the whole time throughout your weight loss journey. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say weight is one of the toughest issues, because once again, what I began seeing in practice, and part of this huge expansion that really challenged me to dig into myself too, was you're getting into people's habits. You can change their life from this, and change is really freaking scary. And at the same time, but we can also be attached to our family, friends, our ideals. And change could also mean redefining all of that. So, to the first point, I actually challenge everyone to redefine what health means to you. So
Yeah.
this is beyond just a perfect weight. And, I think too, this is a lot of the healthier message of body positivity, is that saying like, you're okay where you are.
Yeah.
And then, go back, say, hey, but am I also doing all that I can? And then if you're not, there's forgiveness and, so forth. And then if you are, there's still a level of forgiveness, because you're honoring the journey. And, so in where you are, it's challenging that what health means to you. So maybe, one day you're at a party, and one time you would have totally drank like every bottle of alcohol and ate a whole box of cookies. Maybe with some work that you've been doing where you don't always realize it, but now this next time that you go, you're enjoying a glass of wine, you have a plate of cookies, and you're able to just leave without the sugar rushes, without feeling hungover, whether it's emotionally or physically.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, we get so many more markers of what healing really means, which then in turn can actually be quite motivating to saying, oh, we're on the right path. Because as humans, we believe it when we see it, except the universe doesn't work that way. The universe says, believe it, and then we'll show it to you. But it may not be quite in that exact way. But that said, it could also be better. So even if patients say, oh, well, I want to get down to this weight, I say, but what if it's not this weight? What if it's more? What if there's another way for your body to be that's actually where you'll feel 10 times better? So that's where, once again, coming back to that feeling and just redefining, knowing that you're safe, but more than that, even finding a different tribe, talking to people, which is also going to be scary. So let that reflection be too within yourself of wherever you start to feel that, oh, but I don't know if I can. That's your perfect time to just remove yourself from the situation and say, wait, but why not?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when these resistances come up, like, I can't say I'm struggling with some weight loss problems, and you're asking me to, feel what it feels to have that ideal weight, to have harness that power of, positive belief and thinking. And like, what if I'm not able to at all, just imagine myself in that, ideal weight, and maybe I'm not even 100% aware of what my ideal weight looks like. You just said it could be something completely different for, than what I have in mind. So how do I find that out for myself? Like, what is the best health or, weight for me, to redefine my, health goals? How do I take that step if I'm not able to first find out what is, able to define what is my ideal health, what it looks like, and what do I do if I feel all these inner resistance?
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, great question too, because, and I've been asked this as well. First piece, don't even look at anyone else. I know there are vision boards of people that we may want to look like. Do not compare. Like, just, this is you.
Yeah.
Your amazing body, spirit, mind, your physiology, your inner workings. So you're right. Even if you can't always think about what that would look like, because once again, oh my God, is this gonna happen tomorrow? Is this gonna, and then it kind of just like, you can already feel the energy kind of clench up. Take a step back and then also ask yourself, what is coming up for me? Like, what do you believe about weight? What do you believe about looks? What do you believe on how your body should react and that it's not? So there's kind of along those lines of questioning. So asking yourself, what are your beliefs about health, about weight? And this is where it's like, oh, but if I eat the right foods and if I'm doing all this cardio, because we see too, like, cardio used to be the big thing, but then it was high intensity interval training. Low carb, low fat is now like, oh God, like none of that, go high fat. So there's all this chaos around what should be.
Yeah.
So bringing that to awareness, now you can move that all out of the way. So let's start from the very foundation of it. Are the foods that you're consuming, are they giving you the mental clarity? Are they letting you move through the day without the 3 p.m. sugar crash? Or that general like, oh my God, I need coffee moment? Are you able to wake up in the morning? Are you able to get at least the first 4 hours of sleep at night? Does your stomach still pretty much stay the same after you eat? How's your GI? Are you getting headaches, rashes, just a little, because sometimes, even the wrong foods too, because then I could, get into food intolerances, can make us a little more antsy, irritable, can affect our mood, even a few days later. So, having that mindfulness, and this is where diet diaries come in. I always say it's actually more for the patient than it is for me, because they get, some good aha moments. So from the food, are you getting to bed at a decent time? So even like before 11 o'clock is kind of the universal, because if you're feeling hungrier, or, from the stress side of things, because cortisol drops at night. So are you fully letting that cortisol curve drop? And if not, chances are it's really showing up on the abdomen. And cortisol, the stress hormone, will be one of the first things to mess with blood sugar, and especially mess with estrogen, progesterone, and also testosterone, and the thyroid. So we know this, and I say this with a full heart because I've also worked with fitness professionals and other wellness professionals. It's not that you don't. We do. It's just a matter of we have all this information and then we want to go science and research and the fancy stuff. And what I'm asking is, how can you redefine what symptoms, diagnoses, treatment, redefining everything that we think of medicine, and now being able to trust yourself in a world that says we need everything that's advertised.
Yeah. So, Serena, I do want to get into the spiritual stuff we talked about in our last conversation.
Yeah.
So I found that just incredibly fascinating, the viewpoints that you bring. And one thing we talked about is, in particular, was ego death. You were talking about this to me the other day. We had that conversation. And I found that fascinating, that, the perspective you give, and also death in general. And this is now with the pandemic going on, a very relevant topic. A lot of people I personally know have lost family members. I myself lost my mom last year. So, it's a difficult time. The whole world is going through a very difficult time. And, spirituality, it helps a lot of people deal with those things. And for the viewers, I do want to say at this point, like, this is where the scientific part of our discussion is kind of ending. We're kind of moving and transitioning into spirituality, which means something different to everyone. And I just find it so incredible, the perspectives you gave and the insights. So tell me a little more about this. What is ego death, and what is your view on the topic of death and ego death?
So what's interesting, so actually doctors, and I was thinking a lot about this too, because it really took me a lot of time to even be able to talk about this, because I mean, science, medical school, it's so fancy and impressive, and yet there was this whole other side of me, and I was never raised with spirituality, and so I really found out about it about a year and a half ago. And the more I began looking into it, just in different layers, even Hippocrates knew it, our father of medicine, Socrates, Ptolemy, like medical professionals back in ancient times, who of course were, working their own healing. They were astronomers, medical professionals, philosophers, mathematicians. They were so well versed, but still that very okay, how can we connect and understand who we are? So, as I mentioned earlier, energy moves. It is always moving. We can choose how we want it to move. So when I talk about ego death, that's from that kind of day to day, is that, where you could hear something, then maybe you'll have some episodes in your life or some new realizations, then you'll hear it again and be like, wait a second, I need to question this. How true is this really? Because the moment you begin questioning all, your values, how you grew up, it's scary. Because it seems, our limbic system really likes to keep us just as is, because that's how we knew how to survive. And from the psychology standpoint, we have over 7 different defense mechanisms. So this is why you literally cannot beat yourself up for what you didn't know, because we have underlying mechanisms protecting us from information. Because, if we talk too fast or too much to people, then there's this, oh my God, I feel like I'm going crazy. What those defense mechanisms do is say, I'm going to put this shield up. I'm not ready to take this in, but I'm still going to go live my life and be okay. So from the death perspective, the evolution, think even from toddler to teenager, whether it's unconscious or more conscious, we're always going through something depending on what we choose. So as humans being meant to evolve, are we choosing that path and that process? Or is there this kind of pulling back to the actual physical death? It's funny. So I'm actually writing an article a lot about intuition and motivation. And in there, I was researching what it means to be end of life. So it's true. While we can't always imagine that ideal of how we look, and I think nor should we, which is that, okay, get comfortable thinking that our body can change. Okay, but now let's get to what we need to feel, moving forward, because then that will also show us, bless you, any sort of resistance is where we need to heal. So now we can really take a look at things objectively, because nothing is good or bad. It just is. And throughout life, so towards the end, there have been studies done that people nearing the end, so to speak, of their physical body, they wanted to have an impact on the world, on people. And one of their other sentiments was they wanted to live a life that they were proud of, because that's kind of the stage of reflection. So on our scale per se, because, we may not know, is how can we also have those reflections throughout our life? So supposedly when, that time does come, we're not wondering, we're not hoping, because then there's also many people, regardless of their physical disease, which is funny because no one ever mentioned, oh, my sickness, they were all talking about them and themselves and their life. So the next piece, so just to leave a little space for that, in that, how can we be at peace with who we are? Because conversely, well, what if we did know? And so they actually did this way back, kind of around a couple of centuries into AD, but that kind of BC to AD, that shift. Natal charts in astrology were used in a way that could also predict when someone was going to die. And usually like kings, queens, royalty, they made sure, they wanted to know, especially when was the best time to rule and so forth. So with their death being predicted, there were many who actually tried to evade it, but they're, needless to say, they couldn't. One of the more extreme examples was this one ruler who found out, even to pretty much the exact hour, the when and the how he was going to die. And this was not for another, 20 years. So theoretically, you could take the mindset of, so how do I want to enrich my life? On the other side, he took the exact opposite. He went on killing rampages, destroying villages, the greed, the fear. He let fear envelop him so much that I think he even had the clocks changed, in the palace and everything, or something along those lines. But sure enough, he literally couldn't cheat Father Time, and without him realizing that there was actually a window of opportunity, was pretty much how he passed. So I say that to give the compare-contrast of the fragility of life, perhaps our deeper meaning beyond just our physical body, and the who we are and the importance of those reflections beyond just so much, but then saying, hey, we're in this awesome physical form. What can we experience? Ooh, who can I meet? Who can I talk to? How can I experience the world? We can experience, in like the fresh air and, even stick our feet in the dirt, like get into nature. And on the other side of things, if we don't feel as free per se in our physical body, gratitude for our thoughts. What can we reflect on? Because as long as we have our mind and our consciousness, as long as we could start to envision what we want to do, it's there. It will just take a little time to materialize, but having it going on upstairs, there's so much we can do.
Yeah.
If things are frustrating, if feeling stagnant, literally honor whatever you feel. It's not, because if we were also always happy, we wouldn't appreciate that either. So we do need the dichotomy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And if you truly feel that something's not right, or maybe you need a bigger perspective, or as I said, like, I've also too had those issues that didn't fit the ICD-10 code. Even in medical school, they say not every patient walks in reading the Merck manual, which is our, huge, thick book full of like all these different descriptions of the exact symptoms that you need to have. Because we're spiritual beings in a physical body. And I'd say that was one of the biggest phrases that helped change my life in helping both me and my patients really slow down and understand what we can change, as well as our meaning of life.
Yeah. Love that. Serena, when people want to find out more about your work and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Of course. So the best way to reach me is on my website, which is where I have all my social media. I do offer complimentary 20-minute phone calls. There's even a contact form as well. And that's drserenagoldstein.com.
It was such a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, I'd love to be here.